Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Cassie, and today we're going to be talking through my top 10 tips for beginner sewers. So these are all things that I wish I had learned along the way, things that would have made my sewing journey maybe a little less rocky or emotionally turbulent at times. Before we get into it, if you are new to my channel, I would love if you subscribed and gave this video a like at the end if you like what you see. And without any further ado, let us get into my top 10 tips. So tip number one, and this is one, if you've watched any of these kind of videos before, it's one that you will hear, but slow down. Seriously, it is not a race. The amount of times, and I still do this because I love the feeling of finishing a project, but the amount of times that I have sewed something too quickly only to have like wobbly lines or, tried to sew buttonholes too quickly and then I messed up the buttonholes. Trying to do anything too quickly is just not a recipe for success when you're sewing. You're not in a race. There's no, there's no expectation for you to be sewing quickly. Sew as much in a day as you feel comfortable. Stop when you start to feel tired, but I won't get into that because that's another point. And just take it easy. It's meant to be fun, and you're not meant to finish your sewing project in one day. And that's it. There are projects that you can finish in one day, but really sewing is about the journey. Number two is to choose your fabrics and your needles carefully. So when you're choosing your fabrics, you always want to make sure that you have the corresponding needle. So for jersey, you want a ballpoint or a jersey needle. For denim, you want a denim needle. For, thicker cottons, you might want a thicker needle or even the denim needle again, and so on. Finer fabrics, a finer needle. You want to make sure that you are matching the fabric to your needle, and you want to make sure that you're also matching your fabric to your skill level. So if you're new to sewing, starting with silks and satins is maybe not you can do it, but all the power to you, but it is not the easiest way to go. I recommend doing like a canvas or like just a nice linen, like a medium weight linen. Even a like lightweight linen will be okay too. Something that is sturdy, that's not going to shift a lot as you sew, that's not going to stretch or warp or any of that. That is my recommendation. Take it or leave it. If you want to sew that like satin silky dress, you go for it. But I've only started recently using knits and other more slippery fabrics. And let me tell you, it is tricky. It's tricky to get into. It is worth it, but you can build it up and get there eventually. Tip number 3 is to check twice and sew once. Even check 3 times, check 4 times. Just don't do it once, do it in multiples. And this goes for a few things. For one, pinning, you want to make sure that you have the notches lined up. To have the notches, you want to make sure that the notches correspond with the right place on the pattern. You want to make sure the darts are lined up properly. You want to make sure that you are sewing the right parts together. Now, I always mark my right side of my fabric from my wrong side of the fabric. I'll put just like a piece of tape on the wrong side so that I know this is the wrong side, because it is very easy to get your pattern pieces mixed up as you start going, and then that's a surefire way to sew the wrong things together. So as you're pinning, as you're marking, as you're sewing, all of that stuff, make sure that you are checking twice, because it is much easier to check twice than to seam rip. And it will take you much longer to seam rip than it will to check your work. Step number 4, don't sew when you're hungry or when you're tired or when you're thirsty or, any of that. I will often, when I'm sewing, just keep going and push through. Sometimes I won't eat breakfast, sometimes I won't eat lunch, and then I'll get up and I'll feel kind of faint and I'll wonder why. Not a good idea. You're more likely to make mistakes when you're tired. If you've ever sewed late at night and you start to make mistakes, my rule is if I'm sewing at night and I make a mistake, I have to stop there. I cannot go any further because I know that I'm tired. Even when I'm sewing regularly, if I start to make a lot of mistakes, that's a good cue for me to stop. So make sure you're fueled, you're rested, you have everything you need, and if you need to call it quits for the day, if you need to take a break, do that. It's okay. Your sewing work will be there when you come back. Number 5 is learn new skills on scrap fabric. So if you're trying something for the first time, whether it be a zipper, button, mitered corner, any kind of new skill that you've never done before you do it on your work, do it on a scrap piece of fabric. I'll even do tests on scrap pieces of my fabric that I'm using for my work so that I know what it feels like and how the machine will react to it. You can also do a muslin. I personally don't really do muslins, only for jeans, pants, more complicated works, but I highly recommend doing a test of any new skill that you're learning. It just helps to do it right the first time on your garment and mess up in your practice beforehand. So that's what I recommend for any new skills that you're learning or something that you're rusty on. Plus, buttonholes are always a good idea to test. No matter if you've been sewing buttonholes forever, you don't know how your fabric is going to react to the buttonhole. Number 7, press the front and back of your seams. You're probably always told to press as you go, and it's really important, definitely do that. But are you pressing on both sides of your seams? Are you just pressing on the one side? For example, if you're sewing a dart, are you pressing over the dart just on the one side, or are you also flipping it over and pressing the dart from the other side? Doing it on both sides is really key to having that very clean, finished looking garment. Next up is to always follow the grain line and other markings on your pattern. So next week or the week after, I'm likely going to be having a video on how to use a pattern. So you may want to hit the notification bell to get notified when that goes up, but that will be coming in the next few weeks. And you always want to make sure, one of the things I will talk about in that video is the grain line. So the grain line is either the warp or the weft, meaning it either goes straight up and down or straight across. On the diagonal is the bias, and the bias can lead to a whole bunch of problems. We won't get into it in this video. If you want more details about grain lines, let me know in the comments and I can go into that a little bit more in detail when I do my pattern video. But all you need to know really from here is make sure you're following the markings. Like I mentioned before, the notches, the grain line, the circles, all that stuff are really important guides, and those should not be skipped. Next is, don't try a pattern that has too many new skills. My personal rule is to only make patterns where I am learning 2 skills max. If I have to learn 3 or more, then I know I'm gonna get frustrated and that's maybe not the right pattern for me at the time. It's one that I can put away and try another time. So less than 3 skills ideally, but also if you want to do more than that, just go at your own pace. And going back to that first point, go slow. Number 9 is, you don't need all the fancy tools. Just start with the basics and see what you need. You don't need every fancy ruler or every fancy scissor or all of the different markers. You just need, one marker, like a neutral colored one, like yellow I think is a good kind of in between. You need one good ruler, you need one seam ripper, you need one pair of fabric shears. You don't need much more. You need an iron. So start with the basics, and then as you start to level up your skills, maybe you want to also level up your tools. And lastly, stop worrying about failing. I hear on TikTok a lot and also on Instagram that, people, the number one thing that are stopping people from learning how to sew is the fear of failure. And to me, I get it, because I also felt that way. You're worried about messing up a garment. At the end of the day, it's just fabric. It really is. And if you're really concerned about messing up the fabric, then go get thrifted fabric. Start with that. Start with bed sheets at home. Do a muslin first or a toile so that you know how the pattern goes before you get into your good fabric. But don't have, scissor fears. Don't be afraid of cutting your fabric. That's all a part of it. And at the end of the day, if you mess up a garment, you can always make it into something else. You can make some fancy napkins for you and for, your friends and family as gifts. And that's all good to go. Like, stop worrying about failure. And I know it's hard to take this into practice, but it really is not a big deal. I hope that you enjoyed that video. That's all for my 10 tips for new sewers, things I wish I knew before I started sewing. It's not so long ago, and honestly, it's a good reminder for me too, because especially the slowing down and the failing piece are things that I could probably keep in mind a little bit more than I already do. Also the new tools, because shiny things, new things is always very exciting. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, I really love a thumbs up. It helps me a lot as I grow this channel. And if you are not subscribed yet, then hop along, because I'm going to be posting every Tuesday or Wednesday pretty consistently. It's my new schedule, and coming up in the next week or two I will be having a video on how to use patterns, so stick around for that. Check the notification bell if you want to be reminded when that comes out. And another video that I have coming up will be everything that I made this summer, so that will be all my summer makes in one video. Stay tuned for those. You don't want to miss them. Thank you again, and bye bye.